Hello. As the title suggests, I just spent a week painting portraits and surprisingly I've learned a lot. Now, I'm not saying I've never painted before. I've sort of never painted portraits before, especially not in oils. But yeah, this week something possessed me to give it a go and I gave it a go, and I actually learned quite a lot in 4 portraits and 5 days, and I thought I'd share those things with you here because what I've learnt, I think, is something that maybe you're told in short videos or TikToks or things like that, but I can't say that they've ever really sunk in until I gave it a go myself. So if you're thinking about giving it a go, give it a go, because there's no other way that you're going to learn other than doing it and getting it wrong and doing it again if you feel like doing it again. So I've written down a little list of 5 things, and these 5 things, maybe I've been told before. I feel like I have been told everything on this list before, but nothing on this list had I taken into account before I started painting these portraits. And the first one, I didn't take any of these into account. And I still got a portrait and I still was really proud of it when I was done. But I'm really proud of the final one that I've done, even though the final one's not perfect. And I'm not quite so proud of the first one that I've done, even though I still think it's pretty good. So yeah, I'm going to start with my list, and the number 1 on my list is start with thin layers. Now, I didn't even realise that like thin layers was a thing. Like, I knew you could thin your paint down, but how did you thin your paint down? I bought a little tube of the gambling thing that thins the paint down for you, but that wasn't doing it, and I guess maybe it's the wrong thing. Yeah, and what I used to thin my paint down was the thing that I used to clean my brushes. I always figured that broke down the paint so that you could wash your brushes, but I guess it works like water with watercolour in that it waters down your paint. Yeah, so use thin layers, and actually using thin layers has made a huge difference in my painting. My first painting, and I'm sure I'll be putting these on the screen if I've left space. Maybe I have. My first painting was thick paint. There was no thinning of the paint at all, and you just keep adding paint to your brush and it starts clogging up your brush, and I was getting so frustrated because the paint wasn't going on the canvas. I was putting paint down and then I'd be like, oh, I need to put a bit lighter colour down on top of that, or a dark colour down on top of that lighter colour, and I'd add some darker colour to my brush, and then I'd go to add it to the canvas and it just wouldn't go on. Like, I'd be picking up the paint off the canvas rather than putting on new paint onto the canvas, and it was super frustrating, and I just had to be putting more and more paint on to try and get any sort of colour to change on the canvas. And the reality is I needed to thin down my paint a lot more, add a lot more of that solution to thin down my paint to get it to stick to the canvas, and then you can use slightly thicker paint, like not even much. I'm still thinning it down with terps or the zested stuff that I use, and it'll add and it'll stick to the top rather than be layers and layers and layers of paint on top of each other. So absolutely thin down your paint, almost like you're using like a gouache or a watercolour or something, but not that thin, not that much, but definitely add to your brush, and only a little bit to your brush will thin down your paint a lot. And I guess it's not water, so it absorbs slightly differently like an oil. So that's my first, and that made such a difference to my paintings. You can see my first one to my last one is so different that it's definitely part of, and they're over there, that's why I'm looking up there, it's definitely part of thinning that paint down. Yeah. The second one is to pre-mix your colours. I just used one colour, so they're all either grey or blues, because I don't think I'm quite at the point where I could put actual flesh tones down, so I'm just doing tonal paintings really at the moment. But yeah, I pre-mixed a huge amount, so my palette was full of pre-mixed colours, and I had my darkest value was what I originally mixed, and then I added white to it to thin it out, and then I had a big lump of white because I felt like the more I wanted to lighten the painting, the white would mix with the colours and it would very quickly darken, especially with light skin tones like I have. So to darken the paint is really easy, but to lighten the paint is a lot harder. So yeah, plenty of white, plenty of that light skin tone, and the shadows in your face are maybe not as dark as you think they might be. You can definitely see by my second and third painting that the shadows are really dark, and by the fourth painting they're not quite so dark, and because they don't need to be quite that dark colour, not black, but they don't need to be that dark. Mix new colours, so mix your colours beforehand, have your palette mixed. I use a glass palette, and since changing from those paper sheets that you rip to a glass palette has been worlds different actually. I can clean it off and not have to worry about it, and I'm not throwing away a load of rubbish into the bin. And talking about colour, I was surprised to learn that a small change in the tone of your colour and how dark it is or how light it is makes a huge difference to the painting. You don't have to go from like super dark shadows to super light shadows. Just a light change in colour, you'll see it in the painting. So yeah, that surprised me. So, you know, experiment with how light and how dark your colours are, but yeah, be really mindful about just those light changes in colour makes a difference on the page. And I didn't really notice that until maybe my third painting, and I realised that, oh, I only changed that colour a little bit, and that colour, you can just see the little slight change, and it makes a difference. It makes a slight like dent in the face, or highlight in the face or something. Yeah. My fourth tip is to grid out your page. Don't be afraid to grid out the page that you're working on, your canvas, and to have a gridded picture next to your canvas that you're constantly working from. I use my iPad just because I don't want to be printing out paper all the time, but you could print out paper. But on my iPad I have two images of the thing that I'm painting. One of them on the left has the grid on it, and it's black and white and it's tonal, and the one on the right is the original image, about the same size. So I have two images of the person that I'm painting next to my canvas, and I've gridded out my canvas so that I can put my basic lines down, which I did those with either oil paints and a really small brush, but I also did it with a little graphite pencil on the final one. I think it works fine because eventually you cover up the lines anyway, and you're then working from the reference, but it's good to have a basic sketch. At least I found that really helpful to have a basic sketch. Yeah, but play with it, test it. And I think once you get a layer of paint down, even if it's just mid-tone, and then you add, you know, you get a load of mid-tone and your basic tones down, and then you can sort of play and move the paint around a little bit. But whilst the canvas is dry and there's no paint down, you know, you'll be sort of scrubbing in paint a little while. So getting those original lines down means that you can get your original contours of your lights and your darks, and it'll be a little bit easier to sort of keep adding paint and blending and doing those little detail bits that sort of come at the end. But you just sort of build and build and build and build. And my final tip, and actually it makes a difference, is to step away from your painting. You might almost finish it in an hour, let's say, because they're only small and mine were only A4, so most of mine, the first 3 of mine took an hour or less, where the fourth one took about 3 hours. Step away from it every now and again. Get to a point where you're like, yeah, I kind of like that, and then step away, go and make a cup of tea. It doesn't have to be for long, but you know, come back with that cup of tea, and then you look at it again and you go, oh, oh, maybe that's a bit off, or maybe I need more highlight here, and oh, actually that left ear looks a lot lighter or a lot darker than it should be from the reference photo, and you start to see little things that you didn't see before because you go blind to it the longer you look at it, and you're really looking at those details eventually. Yeah, so step away from it. Definitely step away from your artwork. It doesn't have to be overnight, it doesn't have to be for long, it could just be turn around, check your emails, scroll socials for 5 minutes and look back up at it. I was painting just off camera here, and I was sat on this chair every now and again. I'd scroll and I'd just be glancing up at it thinking, oh, actually maybe something can change there. So definitely step away. And it's oil paint, so it'll still be wet tomorrow, so don't be afraid to, if you're tired or if your back's hurting, or if you think I've been looking at this for too long, I can't stay looking at this for any longer. If you've got the energy to do it tomorrow, step away and leave it till tomorrow, because the paint will still be wet, and you can still work on it, and you will not ruin that painting by stepping away for a little bit. Definitely step away. Yeah, they're my 5 tips, really, 5 things that I learned. I don't know where the bug came from this week to do some portraits, but I really wanted to do them, and so I'm really glad I did. Actually, I'm really proud of them. They're really good. I think they're really good. I'm really happy with them, and I definitely want to paint more. I would definitely want to be doing more oil painting, even though that's not really what I do. That's not my profession, so to speak. Yeah, definitely give it a shot. If you've been thinking about giving it a shot, go for it. I'll add one more thing in that I was doing that nobody online was telling me to do, and by my final portrait, I found it easier, and that was I didn't start with my darks, I didn't start with my shadows. I actually started with my midtones and my highlights, and then I added in my shadows. I feel like the dark paint was overloading the light paint a lot quicker, and I really wanted to get a load of paint on there first, and for me it was easier to see my highlights than it was to see my shadows, and they went in very quickly in terms of the process of the painting. I had my 3 main tones in pretty quickly, but the first colour I put down on my palette wasn't my shadow colour, it was actually my mid-tone colour, and then I added some highlights in, and then I added my shadows in, because you can always darken your shadows, and you can lighten your highlights, but for me it was just easier to put my mid-tones in. So if you find a process of doing it that's different to how you're told to do it online, if it works for you, it works for you. And a small handful of other notes that I've been using. These are the brushes that I painted with. Tidgy tiny little brushes, and these I was painting on A4 pages, and I started with bigger brushes than these, and I realised that actually these 2 brushes are doing a lot of the heavy lifting for me, and I didn't need giant brushes. I started my first portrait with a big flat brush, and I say big, it was, maybe about the width of both of these together, flat brush, and I just couldn't get any of my details, and it was just it was frustrating me really, and I needed something a little bit more detailed orientated, and it might take me a bit longer to cover some canvas, but this is exactly what I wanted. This is a size 4, it's a graduate round brush, and this is a size 5/0, and I think it's a cheapy brush from some sort of craft shop somewhere. So the terps that I was using was just regular Winsor & Newton terps. It comes in like a square metal can. That's what I started using, but it's really quite stinky. I then I'd sort of run out of it, and I needed to replace it anyway, and I didn't have any more. So I bought some Zest It. And it smells like oranges, and it doesn't make my studio smell nearly as much as the terps did, and because I was using it quite a lot, the terps was sort of getting around in the room. The other thing that I used was this solvent-free gambling stuff. this is what I was talking about, that I was originally thinning my paints with, and I'm not sure, it thins it a little bit, but it doesn't really thin it down so you can cover the canvas a lot. It was still kind of thick, so I haven't mastered this yet, so I'll keep playing with it. But a lot of people, at least some of the artists that I've seen on YouTube, was using this to say that they were thinning their paints down, I think, and it just wasn't working for me. The final thing I will say is, on my iPad, I've been using, this is where I was getting my references. So this is what my references would look like. And this one's gridded, and then this one's the original painting. And painting picture. And I would have that right next to my painting. And then the app that I used to change that value one is called Value Study, and it has like mountains in the app. I'm not sure if it's on Android, but it's definitely on Apple because I use it. And I then just put the two pictures together in Procreate, but you could use a free photo merging app, that's fine. Yeah, thank you for sticking around. If you give it a go, if you try painting, I'd love to see the paintings that you paint. I'm really curious. I really like seeing oil paintings, especially portraits and stuff. And yeah, go for it. Give it a shot. Why not? Anyway, if you're new here and you've never seen me before, my name is Katie. I am an illustrator, although you can be the judge of that, and I'll see you again.